Everybody with Angela Williamson is made possible by Fireheart Pictures and viewers like you. Thank you. People build more caring relationships when they seek out ways to empower one another. It creates a greater sense of belonging within a community and helps individuals discover their unique gifts and talents. Tonight, we discuss how art empowers our community and strengthens relationships. I'm so happy you're joining us.
From Los Angeles, this is KLCS PBS. Welcome to Everybody with Angela Williamson, an innovation, arts, education, and public affairs program. Everybody with Angela Williamson is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you. And now your host, Dr. Angela Williamson.
Welcome the artist, Man One. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely, thanks for the invitation.
We want to talk about your art, but before we talk about your art, just tell us a little bit about you, because there's something in your childhood is a reason why you're this incredible artist today.
Okay, if you say so.
I do.
Well, born and raised in Los Angeles, son of Mexican immigrants, oldest of three. And I grew up just being a normal kid in Los Angeles, but with a love for art for some reason. And got into graffiti art in high school, which totally transformed my trajectory and what I wanted to do in life. And so fast forward now, I'm a full-time artist. This is what I do.
And at some point when you decided, because you're also too, we will actually interview someone that you went to college with in the next segment.
Yeah.
You also went to college as well. But did you major in art or did you major in something else? So you just knew and you decided that is going to be what I do.
When my mom says that I was doing art since I was a little kid, since the first day of kindergarten, actually, she tells me this story. But always loving art, never knew that I could do art as a career or a profession. Like, no one taught me that or told me that. But when I was in high school and I got into graffiti art, I was like, okay, I'm hooked. Like, I want to do this for the rest of my life and get paid doing it. Even though in 1987, no one used to get paid for doing that. I was just like, this is what I want to do. I don't like, there's no better thing. And so I remember when I was going to graduate high school, I went to St. Francis High School, all boys high school in La Cañada. And I remember talking to one of my counselors and I said, I'm going to go to college, but I have no idea what to major in. And he goes, well, what do you always get A's in? And I said, art and Spanish. And he goes, double major. So that's what I did.
That's what you did.
So I double majored in art and Spanish at Loyola Marymount University and got my degree 4 years later, and this is all I've been doing ever since.
Well, and it's really interesting because a lot of times you already knew what you wanted to do. And I want to talk a little bit about how graffiti art has transformed. And you are the best person to tell us about that. So I'm going to ask you about that in a minute.
Sure.
But when you made that transition from high school and now you're in college and you're majoring in two of your loves, how were you able to combine two of those loves to what we see today?
Wow, that's a great question. Number one, it's like Spanish was my first language. Growing up, my parents didn't even speak English. Now they're fluent. But obviously when I was a kid, Spanish was the first language. So I learned to speak English in first grade. And it was just natural to me, right? So once I got into school and started studying art and all that, I just realized that Spanish is just another tool that I could use in my career as an artist, I actually ended up minoring in Spanish because I was one class short of getting my degree. And I said, I'm not going to teach Spanish. Like, that's not my dream goal is to go, teach Spanish. So I'll just keep it as a minor. But now as a professional artist, I've traveled all over Mexico, Panama. I'm featured sometimes on Spanish television speaking about this kind of stuff. So I've been able to utilize, the language that I love and that I first learned to advance my career,
Well, and we're going to talk about some of your pieces towards the end of our conversation. But before we do that, what's really been interesting to learn about and see just in our lifetime is the level of respect that's come towards graffiti art.
Right.
And I would love for you to talk a little bit about that, because there's a lot of reasons why this is such a viable art form.
Sure.
Please talk about that.
Yeah, like I said, I got involved in graffiti in 1987. I consider myself a second generation graffiti artist from LA, because there was like a previous generation, like in the early 80s.
Wow.
Like, yeah, so 81, 82. And so by the time I started doing it, there was already some, ways of doing it and things like that. And so I had to learn that on the streets, because there was no class or college you can go to learn that.
No graffiti 101?
Actually, not far from here is Belmont Tunnel, where we used to meet every Saturday when I first started, to watch these artists paint. And it was a big, huge area where hundreds of artists would convene every weekend and paint huge graffiti murals. It wasn't necessarily permission-based, but no one messed with us really, except sometimes the gang members. But that was my, college 101 class of graffiti, right? So I learned it there, and graffiti is very much a passed down kind of art form where you learn from mentors, and that's how you learn. But going back even further, to me, graffiti art was part of the Chicano experience. For me, it's part of the mural movement that obviously started with the Los Tres from Mexico, Siqueiros and Diego Rivera, and so to me, it's just an extension of that. The movement is just an extension, and this is what it looks like now. And at first, there was a really kind of a pushback with the early Chicano artists. They didn't want to accept that, because obviously, whenever something is new, it's pushed away,
Yes.
right? So, but once we went to college and got our degrees and started doing murals and all that kind of stuff, then people started taking us more seriously, and then other artists started accepting us as part of the movement. And then fast forward to the 2000s, when street art became a thing, and that was really interesting. But street art, just the word street art, really opened the eyes and ears to just like mass media, mass market. Because all of a sudden, because graffiti had a negative connotation.
Yes.
A lot of people in LA assumed if you had a spray can, you also had a gun, or if you were a graffiti artist, you were also a gang member, which was not true. No. But when this term became street art, it erased all that negative connotation. So a lot of people call me a street artist now, and I don't care. It's like, yeah, I'm a street artist, I'm a graffiti artist, I'm a muralist, I'm an artist, whatever you want to call me, I'm cool with it.
Just appreciate what you do.
Exactly, So that had a lot to do with the shift in people's minds to accepting graffiti, because now they can see, okay, graffiti art, it's an art form, it's part of street art, and it's an evolution of muralism, And so it's taken a lot of education and a lot of time to push that agenda,
Yes.
30 years later or more for my own career. But we're here now,
And you're here now, and you are going to stay. So before we end our time together, I want you just to talk about some of those important pieces, because those pieces that you've created, not only now is this art form that should have always been respected, but now it is respected, but there's stories behind them.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't invite you on the show if you couldn't tell us a few stories.
Oh my gosh, there's so many stories. One of the things is that I started doing, when you start graffiti, it's really about lettering and your name, right? And so my name, Man One, for example, my real name is Alejandro Poli, by the way, but everyone knows me as Man One, and that's the name I got in college, and in high school, when I was taking the bus to school. And this kid gave me a marker one day because he was writing his name on the bus, and I was like, dude, what are you doing? He's like, just graffiti. He gave me the marker. I said, what do I write? He said, anything but your real name. So I was listening to a group called Mantronics from back in the day from New York. So I wrote Mantronics, just kind of being silly or whatever, Anyways, I was hooked. I was like, I love doing this. So every day I'd say, let me borrow your marker, let me do it again. And before long, I was like, I want to do it on the streets. And I realized Mantronics on the streets is way too long of a name.
I mean, I'm spelling it out in my head right now.
Right.
You know, it's probably a triple Scrabble word if we're thinking about it.
So by the time I got to the X, I'd probably get arrested or something.
Yeah.
So I cut it down to the first three letters, Man, M-A-N.
Oh, okay.
So that became my street name, was Man. And so in graffiti terminology, the one is like a copyright or a trademark. So a lot of artists have the number one after their name. So I just became Man One. I just stuck with it. And once I decided to actually make a living and a career and a business, I was like, what better name than Man One? So everyone still calls me that. Why change it? And it just become part of my identity,
Well, that was a great story about how you got your name.
Yeah.
Tell me about the one piece that you can think about that probably means the most to you, that tells the greatest story.
Oh, wow. Well, it's got to be, I think, associated with my parents. My parents came from, my mother from Durango, and my dad from Chihuahua, so both from northern Mexico. And so if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have been able to go to all the schools I went to. They really worked hard to, get me to some of the best schools in the area. So, and they've taught me a lot. They taught me everything I know. I've learned because of them, through them, and their relationship also. They're still married and in their 70s and everything like that. So I did a mural one time based on them, and the client asked me to do a mural that had to do with Mexican heritage, and I said, there's no better way to express my love for Mexican heritage than my parents. So I have a portrait, a mural of them. It's in Lincoln Heights, it's still there. And so I think that's probably the most sentimental piece for me, because obviously I got to do it on a huge scale. It's like 20 feet high by like 60 feet wide. And it tells their story, that it's a love story, but it's also an LA story, and it's a very personal story for me, obviously, since they're my parents. So for me, that's probably the most poignant piece that I've created,
Now, how did you present that to Mom and Dad?
Yeah.
I don't know if my viewers want to know, but I want to know how
Yeah.
to present such. I mean, that is just such a wonderful tribute. So you just say, Mom and Dad, let's go for a drive.
Well, what's funny is at the time, at the time they were living in Palm Springs. So, and this was going to be featured in a commercial. So it's a public mural, but also featured in this commercial. So they said, well, you think you can get your parents here and we'll reveal it to them on camera? So I said, yeah, let's try it. So my brother brought them out from Palm Springs, and we told them that, you're going to get interviewed in my studio, because the wall was right around right around from my studio. So we met there, and then I walked them over and said, oh, by the way, close your eyes. Closed their eyes, walked them a few feet, said, open your eyes. Then they looked at it, and they just started bawling. They just immediately started crying and everything. And so it was just like, one of the most sentimental, pieces I've done, I think.
Our time has gone by so fast.
Yeah.
But before we end our time together, you have been part of this generation that's changed how we appreciate, now we call street art. Mm-hmm. What's your hope for the next generation of street artists?
Oh, wow. I can't wait to see what they create, because the thing about not just graffiti and street art, but just any art, is the evolution that happens and the tools that artists use and invent and create. So for me, it's now looking back and being inspired by the next generation. It's not like I know it all. It's like I want to learn from these guys. So I'm really interested in where they're going to take it, and I think it's leading towards a better, united kind of future for all of us. I think art's powerful and it can change the world.
That is a perfect way to end our conversation. Thank you so much for your time, and also talking about the evolution of graffiti art to street art, but sharing a little bit of yourself and how you've been able to pour into our community.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll be right back.
At the U.S. Center for Safe Sport, we see champions everywhere we look. In every sport, on every court, we're building a foundation to ensure all athletes are safe, supported, and strengthened. At the U.S. Center for Safe Sport, ending abuse is not just our job, it's our promise.
Welcome back. We are here with Leticia Buckley. Leticia, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. Well, you have had such a remarkable career here in the community, and what you're here to talk about today is your newest role in helping the arts in our community. However, there may be some people who don't know about all the marvelous things you've done. So give us a little bit of background and tell us why you're here today.
Sure. So my current role is CEO of La Plaza de Cultura y Artes, but my background is really at the intersection of government and the arts, in that I worked in marketing for a long time, and at one point I made the switch to work for the county in the then Department of Arts and Culture. And it was there that I realized why I'd become a political science major in college. Yeah. It was recognizing the power of policy making and being so close to it in government. And so I feel very, very lucky that I have been involved in big shifts in policy that directly affect under-resourced communities in Los Angeles County. And my opportunity to run an organization that's culturally rooted, Latino community in Los Angeles is kind of a dream come true.
Well, and the museum is something that we can all enjoy so that we are supporting our brothers and sisters there. And it's amazing because I personally wouldn't think about the importance of arts in government, but you saw that as a niche and worked through that. I mean, was it difficult?
No, well, here's the thing. And if you really stop and think about it, arts are at the center of everything. We're all creative. We all have it in us. You got to tackle, figuring something out. You got to do it creatively. That's rooted in arts and culture. And think about this a lot, and it really came to fruition during the pandemic. It's the idea of the artist as second responders. We obviously need folks to help heal people physically, but arts helps your soul.
It does.
And so, in many ways, art is in everything. When we're thinking about urban planning, when we're thinking about juvenile justice system, every component of that, through the lens of creativity, you can solve pretty seemingly insurmountable challenges.
So how are you doing that in your new role?
Well, so La Plaza is a museum, but also a cultural center, very much a community hub. So we don't collect artwork, we collect stories. And those stories is of history that isn't told on a regular basis, right? Mexican Americans in Los Angeles County. We were here before the city was actually founded in the 1700s, late 1800s, excuse me. And our role in creating this city, creating this county. And so what we do is we tell those stories, we preserve those stories, and we amplify them, because the reality is they're not being told in school, they're not being told in the media. And so our role is identifying those folks. And frankly, a lot of them are people that you may not know about, right? We know, and thank goodness for people like Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, and Supervisor Gloria Molina, who is one of our founders and who we send lots of love to.
We definitely do.
Yes. But then there are also everyday folks who are in our community, the abuelitas who are preserving recipes. We know food is at the center of every culture.
It is.
And so at La Plaza, we bring all of that in, we try to preserve it, and we try to share it with our communities. Not just Latino, but everybody in Los Angeles, because we all should know about it.
Well, and by sharing our stories with each other, we find out that we're not too far apart from one another than what the whole world would want us to see, right?
Right, very much so. And very much so, it's the intersectionality of it, right? It's the intersectionality of, I'm raising two children who are being raised in a household. I'm Mexican, my husband's African American and white. They're getting an entire different experience. It's the intersectionality of it, right? And that, I talk a lot about that when we talk about being Latino in Los Angeles, but multiracial, biracial, bicultural, immigrant, undocumented, LGBTQIA. It's all of that.
And it's the large segments of our population that we haven't been able to hear their stories because they've been, what, suppressed?
Marginalized and suppressed. Ignored. Right? It's a variety of different things. And so we see it as our responsibility to ensure that those stories continue, that we're collecting them, preserving them, and that we're actually sharing them out.
So my question to you is, because you do this through several different exhibits, and you have this phenomenal exhibit coming up, and I'd love to talk about that. So let's talk about the exhibit, and then let's talk about how you collected those stories so that we can come and experience that.
Well, the museum, I will say, is free, which is really important. It's a free museum.
Should have asked that.
No, I'm telling you, no worries.
Yes.
It's a free museum right in the center of downtown LA in Pueblo by Olvera Street, literally across the street near Union Station. And, we do a variety of different exhibits. We have a number of permanent collections that tell the story of Los Angeles, so dating back hundreds of years to the story of Los Angeles, including the indigenous community that was here before us, the native community, and trying to incorporate that into it. We've got work to do there, but taking folks through the journey of the Mexican repatriation when American U.S. citizens were being sent back to Mexico. And so through our temporary exhibits, we tell contemporary stories. So we're just finishing up one that has been on exhibit around the undocumented migrant story. We're bringing in a new exhibit called 18th and Grand, the Olympic Auditorium story. So if you're not familiar, Olympic Auditorium right there at 17th and Grand was really the hub of, in many ways, Mexican and Mexican culture here in Los Angeles. For 70 years, boxing, wrestling. I saw Rage Against the Machine in the parking lot in the 90s. And so this exhibit really is telling the story of Latinos in Los Angeles through the perspective of the Olympic Auditorium. And so everything from, lucha libre and what that means in terms of community and culture, but also at a time in the 40s and 50s when we had segregation and when folks were not allowed to even be in the same space. Interestingly enough, at a boxing match in Los Angeles, in downtown LA, you had a combination of folks all coming together around this one activity. And the other thing about the exhibit that we're really excited about is the fact that it really tells a bit of a border story, because lots of folks would come, fighters, boxers from Mexico would come up into Los Angeles as sort of a cultural hub for these folks to really have an opportunity to kind of make it in the boxing world. So we're really excited about it. And one of the things that I'm particularly excited about is it was a female promoter who did this. And this was really her idea and her baby. And so we're honoring her as well. And, as the first Latina CEO of La Plaza de Cultura y Artes in its 12-year history, I like to make sure that we showcase the women and contributions that we've all made to our community.
Did you come in with a personal and professional mission that you wanted to accomplish during your tenure here?
Yeah, well, I will say, I think in many ways we have there's an opportunity for us to own the narrative, to really take control of a narrative, right? The understanding and the impact that Latinos have made in Los Angeles. Not everybody knows that, as I'd mentioned. And so La Plaza can really be a model for that across the country. There are not a lot of institutions like ours. There are some. We've got colleagues in Chicago and folks trying in Texas and others across the state of California, but not in the same way that we would see what I would deem, and fairly so, white-led, rooted in Western European art. That's not what we do. We tell the other side of that, of the impact of what we're bringing, the contribution. And so for me, La Plaza is a model that I hope we can demonstrate that we can tell this story in a way that's relevant and it connects with, again, not just Latinos, but folks across the demographics, right? Of folks just understanding that when it comes down to it, we're all Angelinos.
We are. And what would be, if you had one anything that you can do to help the next generation
Yeah.
so that we can continue this way of bringing all cultures together
Yeah.
under this umbrella of understanding our
Yeah.
past,
Yeah.
what would that be?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Thank you.
You know, I would say, and this is something that I learned from a mentor of mine, somebody who I still am fortunate to have in my life, just be curious. Lead with curiosity. Walk into conversations with, you know, empathy and curiosity, and be open to learning something new. I've been very fortunate that I've been able to lead my career in that way in my life. I try to teach that with my children. I will say one other thing that's really important to me. I'm raising a daughter, a son and a daughter. My daughter's 18, but I always say to her, be confident, right? Just own it. Own who you are and run with it. And ultimately, right, we set what we expect from people. So I would say being curious, being confident, and leading with empathy.
And my last question before we end our conversation today, there are a number of educators that are watching, and I see that this cultural center / museum can be a part of what they're teaching the next generation.
Yes.
How can they form a partnership
Oh,
with you
boy.
to pour into the next generation?
Thank you for asking, because we actually have a really phenomenal education department. We bring school kids from all across LA County into the museum to teach them culinary arts, right? Again, food is at the heart of so much culture. Teach the history, share the history by folks who have experienced it. So they can reach out to us through our website at lapca.org. They can call us up, but we are happy to bring them in. We provide some curriculum. We can help with, and the beauty of it, and I joke about this a lot, but we don't have to ask permission. We can just do it. So we figure out the best way in which to share that information with young kids.
And I like that.
Yeah.
I mean, we just do it
just do
so
it.
that we're changing that next generation,
Yeah.
and we're all becoming one, which is what we should be. Oh, well, first of all, I just want to say again, congratulations.
Thank you.
I cannot wait to see what you do. What you're already doing is phenomenal.
I appreciate it.
But I appreciate just how you've led your life to use that policy to bring the arts so that we can have a whole nother experience. So thank you so much
You're
for that.
welcome. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on Everybody with Angela Williamson. Viewers like you make this show possible. Join us on social media to continue this conversation. Good night and stay well.